you doing out here?
Just contemplating, I guess.
Contemplating about...
Whatever happened to Spyro?
You mean before or after he got moved to Skylanders?
That's what I'm getting at. He had such a long career ahead of him, and things were looking up for him for a long time. I guess I'm just wondering why he was suddenly taken to Skylanders. It doesn't seem fitting for somebody of his caliber.
Well, Spyro had a good career. He started off great, he only got better. Maybe things sunk a little bit early on, but Legend of Spyro kicked off and it sort of kick-started his career again, so... I don't know, it's different when it comes to him. It's just... You can compare him to you and Mario all the time. You both started off fantastic, had some good runs. The only difference is, you're not kicking the bucket.
I guess you're right.
I'm sure he'll pick himself back up eventually. Sure is a lot of rain though.
Yeah, I normally don't see a lot of rain, so it's very nice right now.
I can imagine. You should probably get started on that review though before, you get cold.
Well, I better get started on it then. If you want, you can make some hot chocolate or something. It's only going to get colder. If we're lucky, this rain will let up soon.
I'll make some in a bit and join you. Just gonna sit out here for a little while longer.
Alright, I'll see you in a bit. The Legend of Spyro the Eternal Night. I did a new beginning last year. It was shortly before I disappeared. But I have to wonder down the line if this game is going to live up to the standard that a new beginning has set up. I've heard mixed opinions on it. I've heard it's good in some ways and very bad in a lot of others. So I am a little bit worried with this. But enough talking, I should probably get into the backstory.
There's not a lot to say about the Eternal Night other than the fact that it came out of nowhere. It was scheduled to release a year after A New Beginning came out in 2006 and was a means to entice people back into the series. It would more or less be the same game that The New Beginning was, but with revamped combat and some additional features.
The Eternal Night was striving to be a better continuation of the Legend of Spyro trilogy. Think of it like the Two Towers or The Empire Strikes Back of the Legend of Spyro trilogy.
After all, A New Beginning was generally well received. Heck, even I liked it. I gave it a 7 out of 10. At this point, what were the odds that they could have ruined this series? They had laid down solid groundwork, and all they really had to do was improve upon it. Chrome Studios released a statement later on in the game's development about a few changes that they were going to put into the Eternal Night. They were going to revamp the combat system because people had said that A New Beginnings was really easy. They were going to focus a little bit more on platforming and more puzzles, considering that's what Spyro was mainly known for. And most importantly, and this is the one that got the most mixed signals, is that the game was going to be focusing more on a darker storyline. Now, when I think about Spyro, I usually don't think of a very dark storyline. I mean, A New Beginning tried to focus on that a little bit, especially near the end, but it didn't focus on it entirely. A whole game revolved around a dark story sounds like trouble to me. Nevertheless, The Legend of Spyro The Eternal Night did come out 1 year later, on October 2nd, 2007, to generally mixed reviews.
As usual, I will be looking at the story, the gameplay, and the soundtrack. A New Beginning had a good mixture of the three, so I'm hoping the Eternal Night will have the same thing. Or it could just be a disaster, who knows? I'm sure they wouldn't mess this up. After all, the second movie in the trilogy is usually good. They can't possibly ruin what The New Beginning was doing. So without further ado, let's just start playing the game. Hey Spyro, I don't know how you got onto my desktop, though quite frankly I don't know how anybody gets onto my desktop now. It just sort of happens between scenes. It's starting to scare me. What are you Oh no. Sheesh. I know how you feel. I'm gonna be playing the Wii version of this game. That's definitely not a good sign. And don't get me wrong when I say that. I mean, I love the Wii. I mean, it's not a thing I regret getting. It's just, well, let's just say not everything that came out on it is a hit, let's say. Don't tell Miyamoto I said that, he'll kill me. But I suppose the game couldn't be any different from when it was released on the PlayStation 2. Let's put it in and find out.
Sheesh, they weren't kidding when they said they were going to make this game darker. You can tell just by looking at the title screen. Especially if you remember what the New Beginnings title screen looked and sounded like. But I won't find out anything about the game just looking at the title screen, so let's get into the story and see where that takes us. The story opens up by playing the ending scenes from A New Beginning, after Spyro fought Cinder.
That's a good place to start.
I've got to save her.
What? Save the beast that's been trying to kill us?
Did they change Sparks' voice actor?
I'm just ready to begin the best day ever now that the evil psycho she-dragon is gone.
They did, didn't they?
Haven't been sleeping much? You should listen to Voltaire tell one of his stories. That'll put anyone to sleep.
Well, that's weird. I thought David Spade did okay. I mean, he wasn't the best choice for it, but he wasn't the worst. I mean, I'm not sure why they would change him. Could they not pay him enough money to do it again? Did he not want to? Did they just want to do somebody different that was cheaper? Kind of said the same thing twice in a way, but who plays him now? Where's my phone? Billy West. I've heard his voice around a few times. He's a very popular guy when it comes to voice work. I'm not a big fan of Futurama, but I've heard that's what he's really well known for. Well, maybe he won't be so bad. Let's just see what happens.
Come on, Spyro! Put that sorrow behind you and clap your hands with me!
Oh my god, this is going to be horrible.
I may as well talk about this a little bit before I move on. But Billy West does not make a good Sparks. Now don't get me wrong when I say that. I don't think Billy West is a terrible voice actor. I just don't think he suits this role at all. Either that or he's just not good at what he's being given. David Spade in The New Beginning worked with Elijah Wood really well. It wasn't a perfect role, but he managed to make that brotherly relationship between Sparks and Spyro apparent. With Billy West, that brotherly relationship doesn't seem to exist. They just seem like two characters constantly arguing at each other, and in all honesty, his voice is just more forced and annoying.
Let me put it this way. If David Spade was, say, a Pop-Tart, Billy West would be something along the line of an empty bag of pretzels. It's a horrible analogy, but basically what I'm trying to get at is, whereas there's a lot of flavor in what David Spade was trying to do, Billy West just sounds like this. All that did was just make me hungry. Just a bit of my mustache. There's gonna be hair in this now.
Anyways, let me get back to the story before I get too distracted. Spyro wakes up from a dream and Sparks tells him that Cinder has left the safety of the temple. Being a hero like he normally is, Spyro goes off to try to convince her of staying. And she just leaves. She says something along the lines of her destiny being somewhere else and just ditches him. Just like that. Way to go, Spyro. Not David Spade says something boring and unfunny, and Spyro... he just passes out on the ground. I mean, I know it's something probably very serious and important to the story, but just the way it happens, it's just too funny. Can we hear that one more time, please? I'm going to remember that for the rest of my days. Spyro awakens to find himself in an alternate dimension and gets led through it by a voice that sounds like Martin Jarvis.
Do not be frightened, young dragon. You are not alone.
Yep, that is indeed Martin Jarvis. So Mr. Jarvis gets Spyro an ability that allows him to slow down time. And then it leads him through some trials to regain his Fire Breath ability, which he had lost at the end of A New Beginning. Just as Spyro is about to leave, Martin Jarvis reveals himself to be somebody called the Chronicler, and tells Spyro to find him, and then shows him a picture of a large tree. All in all, the story so far, it's setting itself up quite nice. Let's just see what happens in the next level. Okay, well, that happened. Apparently, while Spyro and Sparks are gone, some dark forces attack the temple, so Spyro must go through the forest to try to find an alternate way in. After navigating past the puzzles, the apes that are attacking, and some other wildlife, Spyro reaches the temple to find Ignitus fighting off some apes. Spyro takes care of the remaining apes, then gets attacked by one wearing a mask, takes him on in a boss battle and defeats him, and then he flies away, leaving Spyro and Ignitus to observe all of the damage. During the meeting with the elemental dragons afterward, Spyro confides that he has been having a nightmare about the mountain he keeps seeing in his dreams. That mountain happens to be called the Mountain of Malifaux according to Terrador, but no information is given on it other than it's supposedly evil. Afterwards, Spyro mentions the dream he had where he woke up in an alternate dimension and was being led by the Chronicler, and it gets a reaction out of the elemental dragons, who view him as nothing but a legend. So the 4 elemental dragons quickly formulate a plan. An event known as the Night of Eternal Darkness is quickly approaching. Knowing that the dragons are no longer safe in the temple, they decide to go their separate ways. Voltaire and Cyril are sent to gather news from the mainland, Terrador is sent to warn as many inhabitants as he can, and Ignitus stays behind to look for Cinder. Ignitus then sends Spyro off to look for the tree that he saw in his dream, to a place called the Ancient Grove.
Oh, yes, Loverly. He always sends us to the nicest places.
Wait, what did he say?
Oh, yes, Loverly.
Loverly?
Loverly.
I think he's trying to say lovely, but it sounded out as Loverly. Loverly. Loverly? That sounds like something you'd say on the first take. Like you make mistakes in it. Why did they choose that as the final word? I don't even know anymore. Every time Billy West opens his mouth in this game, I'm starting to hate him as Sparks more and more.
Anyway, Spyro continues going through the ancient grove until he runs into a group of ape pirates. Shortly afterwards...
All those in favor of turning back?
Oh, Spyro, I get the tired too, but you can't be doing that. I mean, you need some pills or something?
I'm starting to think this is some sort of practical joke where they just have him passing out at the worst possible times. Anyway, Spyro wakes up in the alternate dimension again and gets led by the Chronicler to get back his ice breath. Wait, hold on, why is he getting ice second? Didn't he get electricity before? Who knows, maybe they're just trying to be a little bit different. Spyro demands that the Chronicler explain to him what's going on, but he doesn't. Instead, he shows him a vision of the Mountain of Malifaux, which goes by the name the Well of Souls, and we also get a brief look at the main villain, an ape named Gaul. But instead of getting any backstory or explanation, we're just thrown right out of the dream. Spyro awakens to find himself in a cave. Wait, hold on, how did he even get here? He passed out in the middle of the forest. Did Sparks somehow carry him here? Did the apes from earlier happen to find him and put him there? But that doesn't make any sense though, because when Sparks brings the apes over to where Spyro is, they treat it like they've just seen him for the first time. So that still begs the question as to how did Spyro get to this cave? It's not important. Anyway, after fighting off a legion of these apes, Spyro eventually makes it to the Great Tree.
Okay, found the tree, now what? Oh, of course, it's a boss fight. Might as well at this point.
So yes, apparently the tree that Spyro has been searching for throughout the beginning of the game happens to be a being called Arboric. After defeating it, Spyro runs into the captain of the ape pirates named Scab.
Okay, so there's a very dumb pirate ape, and it's got 2 parrot bat bird things on the sides. Okay, I think I can see where this is going. Maybe this will be interesting. They might have split personalities or something.
Whoa, what's with the gurgling nitwit?
If I were you, I'd shut my mouth. I ain't gonna say it again.
Is that bird trying to be Mr. T?
I pity the fool that messes with us.
And I pity the fool who had to write those lines.
Anyways, Spyro gets knocked unconscious and then gets taken aboard the pirate ship, where the pirates plan to have him be the main attraction in their indoor arena. Shortly before his first fight, Spyro happens to notice Moliere walking by. Moliere was the leader of the moles from A New Beginning. Spyro and Moliere briefly talk about escaping before Spyro goes into his first arena battle. After emerging victorious... Yep, I saw that one coming. The Chronicler helps Spyro regain his Earth abilities. And as he is about to leave the dream sequence, the Chronicler also tells Spyro a little bit about the Night of Eternal Darkness. Supposedly for a few short moments, the moon will eclipse the sun and shroud the entire land in darkness. Gaul and his apes want to bring back the Dark Master from A New Beginning during this time. The Chronicler then tells Spyro to meet him at a place called the White Isle, and Spyro promptly wakes up. Spyro is then sent into his second battle in the arena against somebody called the Ravage Rider, which is just the battle against Steam from A New Beginning. Did they really recycle that fight? Talk about the lazy. After defeating him, Moliere comes by Spyro's cell and hands him a letter.
They say that the Ape King himself has placed a bounty on you, and all of the dragons. These are dark times, but know this, you have allies. I look forward to the day when we can meet. Hunter of Avalon.
Hunter? You mean this Hunter? Wait, let me get this straight. You mean to tell me this guy, freaking this guy, is going to be a very important character in this trilogy's plotline later on? I don't know whether to laugh or actually be happy about that. I was starting to wonder if they were even going to touch original Spyro at all. I guess they are. Spyro gets into another match against somebody called the Executioner, and upon defeating him, he's forced to go into a bonus match. Who is his opponent for the bonus match, you might ask?
Wow, what a plot twist. It's not really a plot twist.
And, to the surprise of nobody that is playing, they don't actually plan on fighting each other, and instead try to figure a way out. Before they even get the word on how they're going to escape, however, Ghost forces show up from out of nowhere and kidnap Cinder.
Wait, hold on, where did they come from?
And look, I'm not doubting the logic in this because Hunter wrote in his letter that Spyro being captured by the ape pirates was pretty well known around the world at this point. But are you meaning to tell me they snuck up on the entire fleet without them knowing and just took Cinder without much effort? What were the lookouts doing? Were they asleep? Anyway, Sparx and Spyro leave the arena and decide now is as good a time as any to get the heck out of Dodge. As they are escaping the ship, they see Moliere overlooking a cell containing the other moles. Moliere begs Spyro to help them escape and Spyro agrees to it. After closing off some exhaust ports, the cage opens up and allows the Moliere and the other moles to get onto a boat.
Merci, mon frère. Thank you very much. I hope we can meet again. Perhaps under better circumstances?
Good luck, Moliere.
That's the last time we're going to see Moliere again, isn't it? Of course.
Before deciding to follow suit, Spyro wants to find a map that will lead them to the White Isles. And the next few parts of this level is really just Spyro going through a bunch of gauntlets full of nothing but apes.
Ooh, a chest! Legend of Zelda and Dark Souls always taught me that opening chests would lead to great rewards. Well, Dark Souls had mimics, but I thought there'd be something interesting inside. You lied to me.
And the level just goes on, and on, and on. You know what, I want to talk about that just for a second before I get right back into it. But this level goes on forever. It feels as if when Chrome Studios was designing this level, they just kept thinking, hey, you know what would be cool? Another gauntlet. It doesn't help that the game is already hard, but I'll get to that when I get into the gameplay. It's gotten to the point where I'm just not really excited about where this game is going. I'm getting very bored just doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Oh look, it's a big chest. I'm willing to bet there's nothing in here. Wait, what?
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit too sidetracked, so let's get right back to the story. After fighting through at least half the fleet, Spyro and Sparx manage to find a map to the White Isles. Just as they do this, Scab walks in and it initiates a boss fight. It's a rather straightforward, but it doesn't finish off like you would expect. Scab flies away, most likely to avoid getting taken down with the burning ship, prompting Spyro and Sparx to follow them?
There's more? Why does this level go on for so long? That doesn't make any sense.
I've got the hand of the Chrome Studios. I've never thought I'd be more sick and tired to see a pirate ship in my life. What, was the hour-long level before this one not enough for them or something? And how does this even make sense from a story perspective? What, is finding the Chronicler not good enough for Spyro? Is Cinder getting kidnapped not that big of a threat? I swear, Spyro has the greatest of priorities. You know what? Forget it. If I spend all day talking about this, it's going to take about as long as it took me to beat these two levels. Spyro eventually catches up to Scab again and goes into the actual boss fight this time. Thankfully, there's not a third part to this. It's as simple as the last fight. Scav goes away for good this time, and Sparks actually does something useful for once other than, opening his mouth and be useless. And Sparks and Spyro finally leave the pirate ships behind and go toward the White Isles. That is, until...
I'll just keep my eyes peeled for the flashing sign that says Spooky Moon Temple. Oh no. Please tell me you're just pulling over to go to the bathroom.
Wow, you have got to stop partying. You felt like a rock.
Joking aside, Spyro has his last dream sequence with the Chronicler and learns his last breath ability, which in this case would be electricity. When the Chronicler doesn't initially answer him, Spyro takes a peek into the fountain in the middle of the room, and the witnesses a scene between Cinder and Gaul, and how Gaul was taunting her about how she was going to be the Dark Master's minion again, and how the Dark Master's return was nigh, and so on and so forth. Spyro awakens to find themselves on the Celestial Caves on the White Isles, and I have to admit, these levels are very soothing. Maybe because I was on a pirate ship for all that time, but despite the trials and difficulties on this level, at least it feels better. It has something to do with the music, the nice combination of combat and platforming, and just that overall sense of wonder I got while playing through it. It was quite fun, despite the fact that if you didn't even out all of your abilities, you're kinda going to be in trouble here. After passing all 4 breath trials and then beating a Cinder clone, Spyro finally comes face to face with the Chronicler. And I have to admit, the confrontation is pretty nice. Even though it's only 6 minutes long, it feels as if it goes on a lot longer than that. During this, the Chronicler gives a lot of backstory for a variety of things. He explains how Gaul was the one who led the attack on the temple in A New Beginning, which destroyed almost every one of the eggs. He goes into a little bit on the lore of the first purple dragon, which happens to be the antagonist of this series, Malefor. Malefor was a purple dragon that, like Spyro, had mastered all of the abilities. The only difference being that Malefor wouldn't stop learning and eventually grew too powerful. When the other dragons exiled him, he raised an army of apes. And with the Night of Eternal Darkness literally hours away, Malefor's return is imminent. So the Chronicler wants Spyro to stay with him so he could weather out Malefor's return and attack him when he's stronger. Spyro immediately remembers that Cinder was still captured, and if Malefor is able to return, she will become his slave again. Not wanting that to happen, Spyro says he's going to go off and rescue her. And surprisingly, the Chronicler just lets him go. In fact, the Chronicler even opens up a secret passage that allows Spyro a shortcut to the Well of Souls. Talk about convenient.
Sparks, you don't need to come with me. I won't think less of you if you stay behind.
No way! And miss the opportunity to live out my worst nightmares?
Way to go, Billy West. You can't even make a touching moment like that sound good. And so the final track of Spyro's journey is to go to the Well of Souls to stop Gaul and rescue Cinder. And I have to admit, despite how spooky I thought this level was, it's honestly the best in the game. It's got a very dark and sinister atmosphere, it's got some pretty nice platforming and a good use of stopping time, and overall you just feel as if like it's all coming down to this moment. Despite all the trouble you went through to get here, it feels as if this final confrontation is going to be really good. But instead it goes as something like this. Spyro tries to confront Gaul and gets immediately shut down. Gaul then forces Cinder to fight Spyro in a hope to break him, but they don't really want to fight each other again and try to take down Gaul instead. That plan goes horribly awry because Gaul is not an idiot and throws Cinder into a wall, and then Spyro has a final battle with Gaul. The fight itself is pretty challenging and rather straightforward because you can only hit them with melee attacks, and then it goes into part 2. Spyro and Gaul fall down into the core of the mountain. The eclipse happens during this time, and Spyro happens to be trapped inside the beam that's leading out of the mountain. The amount of evil energy happening during the Night of Eternal Darkness seeps into Spyro and he becomes Dark Spyro. He literally becomes more powerful than Gaul that he turns him to stone and then disintegrates him. It's honestly a little bit brutal. Unfortunately, Spyro's power happens to be too powerful for the mountain to handle and starts collapsing around them. With no immediate way to escape, they're trapped. Spyro remembers what the Chronicler told him about waiting out the storm, and it brings Sparks and Cinder close to him and then freezes them all in crystals, effectively protecting them from harm inside the collapsing mountain, but on the other hand, they are also frozen in time. And then the credits roll. I have to admit, that's quite a somber way to end it. I mean, I was kind of surprised that it just ended like that. I do think it's a nice enough cliffhanger though, and Chrome Studios definitely went out with a bang. Oh, wait, there is an after credits scene. Basically, the Chronicler is telling Spyro that it will be a different world when he wakes up. And he basically says at the end of the letter from Wait, is that Hunter? All in all, the story has its ups and downs, but I can't help but feel that overall it's just below average. Come to think of it, most of this game probably didn't even really need to happen. In all honesty, the story was supposed to be about Spyro trying to find the Chronicler, but most of the game he's doing the complete opposite of that. Up until the end of the forest level where he fights Arboric, it seems to be on the right track, but everything in the middle of it on the pirate ships really didn't need to happen. And when he does find the Chronicler, he leaves in about 6 minutes. So what was the point of going through all this trouble, just so he could freeze himself at the end? I want to like this story a lot more, I really do, but everything that transpires in this game really didn't matter up until the last level. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a lot more varied than what the New Beginning was doing, where you had to save a dragon, learn his ability, and then save another dragon, so if anything, the story does seem varied and has you do different things, but I can't help but feel a little confused as to why anything in this game had to happen if it really didn't matter in the end. Anyways, I've talked about the story for quite a while. It's definitely better than A New Beginning in terms of being varied, but overall I just can't help but think it's really weak. Alright, now let's move on to the gameplay. Oddly enough, the gameplay isn't that different compared to A New Beginning. If anything, they didn't really change too much other than just add more. They added in more platforming and more to the combat. I'll start with the platforming. For the most part, the platforming is really simple to do. There's nothing really too challenging, though there is a few frustrating parts. I'm looking at you, jellyfish inside the forest. Where platforming comes most in handy is Spyro's ability to slow down time. You could slow down time to stop platforms from spinning around, or you can use it when you have to land on a platform that's very narrow. The only other situations that you'll get to use them outside the platforming will be the lasers inside the Well of Souls, and in a variety of combat situations. And while I'm talking about that, let me tell you what I think of the combat. I walked into the Eternal Night thinking it was going to have combat more or less the same as A New Beginning. Had some very interesting moves, some variety of breath attacks, and overall a very easy and enjoyable experience. Boy, was I wrong! The combat got increased tenfold in this game. Now, I'm not the one to dismiss difficulty. In fact, I think, along with the enemy variety, the difficulty in this game definitely brings a nice change of pace. You actually have to fight enemies now. But at the same time, I think that's the only thing that this is done right. Every enemy in this game does an insane amount of damage to you, and you're always getting swarmed by them throughout the entire game. The enemy variety is nice. You're not fighting apes all the time anymore, more like 60% of the game. But they all have some sort of unfair feature that I don't like. Bigger enemies can still get knocked into the air, but only 50% of the time. Regular enemies will stun lock you to death. Certain enemies will block every attack you do, providing you to have to stop time to get past that. Some of the enemies will pull off a "I'm still not dead yet," just when you think you've killed them. Because of this, every level feels like a chore. You don't know whether or not you're going to run into a small squad of enemies in the next room or an entire gauntlet full of them. And it doesn't really help that the first thing I hear upon respawning is something along the lines of,
Why don't you try shooting some magic out of your face?
"Wow, thanks Billy West. I never would have figured that out if it wasn't for you." It's a shame too, because I really want to like the combat for this. It's a lot more engaging, but at the same time it's the wrong type of engaging. It's more along the lines of, "Man, I can't wait to be finished with this level," rather than, "Yes, I can't believe I actually did that." So when it all came down to it, 80% of the gameplay is combat. I was wishing for more platforming by the end of it. Because despite the simplicity of the platforming, I would have traded everything to get rid of that horrendous combat experience. The only other thing the gameplay has besides platforming and combat would have to be collecting feathers and dragon heads. Feathers are often hidden around each level and are always hidden. For every one you collect, you get 5 pieces of concept art, which you can view in the gallery. While that sounds a bit boring, it's actually some of the most fun I've had. I like finding these things. And looking at the concept art in the gallery is often quite soothing. And it's essentially Chrome's farewell, considering they wouldn't be able to see the series be completed. As for the dragon heads, there's only 5 of each throughout the entire game, and they increase Spyro's health and magic meter. For every red one you find, Spyro's health increases slightly, and for every green one, his magic increases slightly. While I may have said finding the feathers is something to consider, I don't think finding the dragon heads is necessary at all. Finding the green ones might have some uses down the line, but the red ones really don't make a difference considering the enemies still do insane amount of damage. At most, collecting all 5 will probably make you survive an extra hit. To me, that just doesn't seem worth it. Overall, I'm just a bit mixed when it comes to the gameplay. It's got some interesting moments, the platforming especially is really appealing, and some of the combat's not too bad, but for the most part it pretty much is bad, and I really just wish there was more to it. I guess I was expecting something simple along the New Beginnings lines, but maybe I was just bored of that. Now all there's left to talk about is the game's soundtrack. How does that stand out?
I am glad to say that the soundtrack to The Eternal Night is extremely well done. It follows up on what the New Beginnings soundtrack was trying to portray, but in a darker and sometimes more peaceful tone. Sometimes at the same time, sometimes not. And to be frank, I think it's probably the best in the series so far.
And I have to admit, despite all the trials and hardships I had to endure playing through this game, the soundtrack definitely kept the things interesting. Every time I was in combat, it would fit the situation accordingly. And some of the levels, including the pirate ships, actually had themes that were decent even when I wasn't in combat. They don't compare to the Celestial Caves, of course. There's nothing that could even remotely touch that track, but they all sound decent enough. If everything else in the game was a step backward, the soundtrack was definitely a step forward. Maybe at worst, just standing in the same place. It definitely sounds as if it's an improvement. What's the most impressive to me is, as I stated earlier, how the soundtrack actually matches with the game's atmosphere. If I could say anything critical about the soundtrack, I do wish there were more noticeable tracks. Songs that you will hear in Spyro's Dreams or the Celestial Caves are very memorable and get stuck in your head, and they're great. And whereas I like hearing the songs that play on the pirate ship, I do wish there were more memorable. They just sound so generic at sometimes. They still fit the situation and make everything sound good, and they match with the level, but I do wish they were a little bit more, how should I say it, mesmerizing, I guess.
Well, that's it. Honestly, I'm a little bit confused. I guess I walked into this expecting it to be better than it actually was, and by no means do I think that this game is horrible. It's not the worst game I've ever played, but it's very underwhelming compared to what the New Beginning did. I expected this game to go above and beyond what was set up in front of it and maybe take 2 steps forward, but I feel as if this game instead took a step backward. Not 2 steps, not a whole mile backwards, but it was certainly disappointing. How disappointing? Let me go review it and tell you. Let me get this out of the way and say that The Legend of Spyro the Eternal Night is not the worst Spyro game ever made. There's another one that takes that spot, believe me. Instead, I was just expecting something more. And whereas it hit a lot of good notes compared to A New Beginning, overall it just sort of fell apart onto itself. I don't know if it was some sort of production issue while they were developing the game. I mean, I don't want to believe that this game upon release is exactly what they wanted. The Eternal Night is like the equivalent of a child throwing a paper airplane into the air just to have it come crashing into the ground. By no means the paper airplane is damaged in any severe way. The kid could pick it up and throw it again, so who knows? I haven't played Dawn of the Dragon yet, so I can only hope that the series picked itself up from this game, despite the troubles that it might have had. But I'm getting sidetracked once again. Let's start with the good things about The Legend of Spyro the Eternal Night. I'll start off by saying that the combat, whereas it's relatively unchanged, still feels as cathartic as it's always been. In fact, I think there's a little bit more added onto it to make the combat feel more enticing. The combos have been tweaked, Spyro's breath abilities have been changed significantly, combine that with some actual enemy variety compared to A New Beginning, and this game's combat is a huge step forward for the series, despite the simplicity of it. Secondly, the soundtrack to this game is breathtaking. It's got the right mixture of being really subtle and very dramatic when it needs to. The music is just so dark and spooky in some senses, and has the right amount of tensity whenever combat initiates. Thirdly, the game's level design and atmosphere, whereas some of them do overstay their welcome, like I mentioned before with the pirate ships, feel very fresh. Granted, I would have liked something like A New Beginning did, where every level you did was in a new location with a different climate or something like that. Chrome Studios went out of their way to make their levels actually memorable. Some good and some bad, but overall quite well. And then finally, the last thing I liked about The Legend of Spyro the Eternal Knight was, well, the Chronicler. He doesn't get a lot of screen time in the story when he does show up, but throughout the entire game, you're always constantly wondering what he's going to look like and why he's being so mysterious. It all comes down to fruition when you finally meet him. Granted, again, that meeting only lasts 6 minutes, but when you do, it kind of feels like a reward of some kind. What I'm basically trying to say is I think the Chronicler is a very good plot device. However, I do wish that they gave him a bit more lines or just developed him a lot more. But whereas there are some positive things about the Eternal Knight, the bad things are a lot more apparent. For starters, as much as I want to like this game's story, it's probably the weakest part of the game. As I stated earlier, the only parts that apparently mattered in the Eternal Knight were the very beginning and the very end. That whole segment past the temple up until the Celestial Caves really didn't need to happen. It just felt like filler to me. And I know that's a bit of a weird thing to say because I did say that A New Beginning story was very generic and repetitive with, saving all the dragons, learning their abilities, and then saving the next dragon, and so on and so forth. Overall, I just thought that it was weak and probably could have been done better. Secondly, whereas I said the combat is still fun, the difficulty is a little bit too hard. And I say a little bit because deep down I really want to like how they upped the combat for this game. It helps because A New Beginnings was really easy. The merciless enemies, the constant knockbacks, the sheer amount of enemies you're supposed to beat during some of the gauntlets, and it overall was just more frustrating than it was rewarding. Another thing I want to point out is that the voice acting is a lot weaker in this game. In A New Beginning, I thought it was okay. There was a lot of work to be done, but I thought they could have done better, or at least stayed the same. Instead, what I got were a lot of people in the room just reading their lines. It didn't sound like they were attentive to this, outside of Martin Jarvis. And finally, the last thing I didn't like about the Eternal Knight was its playing time. It is exceptionally short. Despite the problems I had about constantly getting beaten up by enemies or getting stuck on a level somewhere, I still beat the game in a rather short time. I beat it in about 6 hours, which to some people might be a good enough time for a single player experience. I'm just stating my opinion. I just didn't think that was enough for me. I just felt as if they probably could have put more instead of less. Overall though, I just don't think that the game is a worthy successor to A New Beginning. Like I stated earlier, for every step the game took forward, it took 2 steps backwards. Overall, the experience was not what I was expecting, but at the same time it's got its merits. But I just can't help but think that it could have been so much more. That is why I'm going to give The Legend of Spyro the Eternal Knight a 5 out of 10. I'm being a little bit generous here because despite how disappointed I was, there was a lot to like about it, but there was just so much that I didn't that it really hurt the final score. But again, it's not the worst purchase I've ever made. It's still a good Spyro game, just compared to A New Beginning, it's a very big letdown. So that concludes this. The next one will be a Luigi's Choice, which, as you may know, will be a very special one because there's something inside a certain box that... Where did the box go? Whatever, it's probably somewhere else in the room. I'll find it in a second. Anyways, I'm a Luigi, and this has been a Luigi review. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go and find it.
Luigi!
What?
Get over here!
Sounded pretty important. I better go see what he wants. Oh, I heard you calling my name. It's getting dark outside, but the rain's still there, so... I mean, you know where the bedrooms are if you still want to stay.
Luigi?
Hey, you will know you just missed the review, right? I just got to finish with it.
Luigi, now's not exactly the best time for that.
Sheesh, no need to get so offended. It doesn't bother me any. I mean, I'm the one who's doing the reviews.
Luigi,
What?
on the table.
Table? What are you talking...